Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 139, Finishing Your First Book, an interview with James Blatch, coming to you on Thursday, April 25th, 2019. I must begin by saying, oh my gosh, I think spring is finally in Sweden. Yay! We thought it was here a couple of weeks ago, and then it got super duper cold again. And I had a couple of days of being, oh no, I'm sure spring is here. So I'll just wear my lighter weight coat and not wear gloves. And then I was just freezing on the way to the train. And this time I'm like, okay, just like take it one slow foot at a time. Wait, no, it's 62 degrees, 17 degrees outside. And the sun has been shining for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days a week. It's been so wonderful. We ate breakfast outside for the first time ever because we didn't have anything to eat on before. And if you were listening last week, you remember that I finally got the last of our, oh my gosh, I don't even want to say 166, how many boxes 166 that were delivered to our apartment, because, oh my gosh, who can unpack 166 boxes in an apartment? But anyway, there was a folding table and chairs, and so we went outside and we ate outside, and it was wonderful. Now, see, a couple of weeks ago, definitely a couple of months ago, today would have been a really frustrating day because I got a thing. I got a notice. There we go. I got a notice in the mailbox saying that we had a package. Yay! Thank you, Belinda. Woohoo! And it weirdly was like, go to this other part of town to pick it up. And I was like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I hope this isn't going to be the new normal. So because it's a holiday weekend, because right now it's the day before Easter when I'm talking to you. So the buses are, a different schedule, and it was late. But 2 months ago, I would have been freezing and annoyed. Today, the sun was shining and I was taking off my hoodie and I'm like, I don't really care when the bus comes. And John and I were just talking about cool stuff, which might include a new podcast, which I may be telling you about in the near future. We'll see how that all goes. But anyway, I hope you are having as fantastic a day and week and month as I am. Like I said, it's Easter weekend right now when I'm recording this intro. And it is beautiful, and I can smell the ham that's in the crock pot, and we've got potatoes in the oven, and basically it's like, hurry up, Kitty, record that intro so we can get to the important things of the day, which is eating Easter dinner. Now, when we moved to Australia the first time, first of all, I had just gotten off a plane on Christmas Day. So there was a whole lot of reasons why I was just exhausted and mentally unbalanced. Yes, I know. My husband would like to say I'm often mentally unbalanced, but what I mean is that everything was brand new and I was exhausted, and I was like, we're going to a barbecue. We're having barbecued hot dogs and hamburgers on Christmas Day. Okay. But it hadn't really caught up with me that it would be, the beginning of summer in Christmas in Australia. So I wasn't ready for that. So this is technically my first Easter. We've been here a year and a week, but this is our first Easter here because of how Easter changes, when it actually happens. So, we are actually we celebrated Easter at church last week because we have a 4-day weekend here, which is just awesome. So apparently most everybody will go away for the weekend or has gone away. So we had Easter service at church last weekend. And then this weekend, we're having our Easter dinner today on Saturday because on Sunday we'll go to church. And then afterwards, we're going to do a barbecue with friends somewhere in a park. So it's definitely not the way that I've ever celebrated Easter before, but I'm very much looking forward to it, especially if it's going to be as fabulously sunny and beautiful and warm and everything. So that is my Easter weekend. I hope yours was super great. Doing something in the spring or the fall, no matter where you're at, you're probably in one of those two seasons. I don't think you can really be in the summer or the winter right now, unless you're really far north or in a really, really hot place. So I hope that you are having whatever kind of weather you want to have. Anyway, okay, now I feel a little bit like I've been spending too much time with James Blatch, because it just occurred to me that he likes talking about the weather at the beginning of the self-publishing show with Mark Dawson. And if you're like, oh, yes, I knew I'd heard that name before. So James is the host of the interviews and the co-host of the show with Mark Dawson of what used to be the self-publishing formula and is now the self-publishing show. So Mark has written some big amount of books. I don't know. He's written a gazillion books. Let's just leave it at that. And James is finishing up his first one. Yay! And he's been talking about it a lot on their show. And I thought, you know what? We need to get James on this show and talk about what has been working as far as how to actually get to the point where you're finished, not just the end of the first draft, which is one ginormous milestone for anyone, but the end of the publishable copy that is now going to go up for sale. Woohoo! So we have a really fun and interesting conversation. And if you've heard James on their show, you know that he's just a fun and interesting person to talk to in the first place. But it was a really good conversation that we had about how you get through 8 years of writing a book and get to the end where you're like, okay, this is edited and good and ready to be sold. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and I hope that you'll definitely get some tips if you are in a place that's similar where you're trying to finish that first book, or you're just every time I write a new book, it feels like the first book. So you may feel like you've been inspired if you're in that space right now too. But honestly, it's just a really good motivational kind of inspirational talk about this is what happens. We start and we keep going and we figure it out and we finish and then we celebrate. So James, when you're listening to this, you have to be thinking, because I don't know if I asked you, what are you going to do to celebrate? Celebration is a huge part of success. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do, because neurologically, our brains are looking for feedback. And so we want to give it positive reinforcement feedback to say, oh yes, this is what this person whose head I'm occupying, the brain is saying, this is what this person wants me to do more of, so I can do that. That is why celebrating is such a good idea. So wherever you're at in your writing journey, look for steps that you can celebrate, whether it's just sitting down because you haven't gotten any writing done in a week and you got some writing done today. It doesn't have to be anything big, but you just need to let your brain know, yes, more of this, please. All right, here we go with our interview with James. I hope that you're totally motivated and inspired. It's going to be a great conversation. And whatever you do this week, have fun with it and try to get some writing done. Today's guest is James Blatch. James is the co-founder of the Self-Publishing Formula, an online resource for indie writers built around the instruction of Mark Dawson, one of the world's leading indie writers. He is also co-presenter of the weekly Self-Publishing Show. James is a former BBC news presenter and reporter. For a decade, he covered defense issues for television news, and during that time, he traveled to the Middle East, Kosovo, and the Arctic Circle, as well as living on board aircraft carriers and flying in military jets. He is close to publishing his debut novel, The Last Flight, set on an RAF station in the height of the Cold War in the 1960s. James lives near Cambridge in England with his wife, 2 teenage children, a pet Labrador, and a guide dog puppy in training. Welcome, James.
Hi, Kitty. Thank you so much for having me.
This is so fun having you on your show because I got to be on, having you on my show because I got to be on your show.
You are on my show, and I spend like you, probably a couple of nights a week interviewing other people. It's a rare treat. I can sort of just sit here and relax, and you have to do all the thinking.
That's right. And because I'm a girl and I love dogs, I have to start with, guide dog puppy.
Yeah, so it's the first time we've done it. She's gorgeous. She's called Charlotte, and she's a retriever Labrador cross. Oh. She's full of character. So she's knocking on 8 months now. And we look after her until she's about 14, 15 months. And at that point, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's a bit like a military thing. She goes to either gets chopped or she goes on to the next training, advanced. So she goes to advanced training at 14, 15 months. And that's when it's called seeing eye dogs in America. We call it guide dogs in the UK. So if she's an A1, they grade them. She's A1, she'll be a blind person who's has a busy lifestyle in the middle of a city, lots of noises. If she's down the scale a little bit, she might be with somebody who only lives in a quiet village and goes out once or twice a week. But at the moment, touch wood, everything's going okay. But
wow.
But yeah, of course, the looming thing, which we knew was going to be the case, is that we've fallen completely in love with her. And in some point next year or end of this year, we're going to have to give her away. So just to go on to the next stage.
I've heard that is probably the hardest part, because the kind of person who would do it is the kind of person who would fall in love with them.
Yeah, and she's so gorgeous. But but there you go. So, but we are really focused on making sure she gets through training. So there's a lot of stuff we're doing with her. And I think we'd be hurt if she didn't make it. So that's our main aim. Yeah,
yeah. On the other hand, poor Charlotte, I'm sorry you failed your graduation. You get to live with us forever.
Of course, the kid's secret plan is for her to fail.
Right.
We hatched that plan. Yeah.
Well, listen, speaking of plans, you have had all sorts of things going on in your life. And I thought it would be fun for listeners just to kind of hear, particularly anybody who has also listened to the self-publishing formula as regularly as I have, which is to say I don't think I've missed an episode. But we've heard a lot about your life in bits and pieces. So let's start. The whole point is you are, no matter all of your experience in writing and communication, writing your first novel.
I am. Yeah. So I did. Yeah. I suppose communication, broadcasting, news. I started in radio, not even in news, actually, just doing afternoon stupid voices and stuff that we did and played around. But it is ultimately all about storytelling. And I started a novel, I think, when I was about 20, maybe 19, 20, and didn't progress very far with it at all. In the old days of writing, it was hard work writing.
Yeah.
And then started one again after I finished at the BBC. So obviously there was something there that when I was at the BBC in my 30s, that kind of scratched the itch, whatever it was that makes us want to tell a story or write a book. And then when the BBC was taken away from me, I sat there for a couple of years knowing that there was something missing. And suddenly this came to me about wanting to write. And I haven't really, it was a few years ago that started. That was 2010. So 9 years this year, or November 2010. But I haven't really stopped writing during that whole period. It's the same book, just keeps getting rewritten.
Yeah.
But yeah, I read a bit every day now. So
now, that's something that I definitely want to come back to, because there are a lot of people who feel like they've gotten so tangled up and spent so much time in the same book that they hear the advice, you should just finish it and or move on. But so we'll come back because we want to get your perspective on that. So
sure.
Part of the other bit that's quite interesting and possibly different from other people is that you are very good friends with a very successful writer. So part of what I am going to ask at some point is also what are the pros and cons of that? There's probably both.
Yeah, I mean that sort of emerged because I knew Mark before he'd had his couple of books in the past, and Mark's quite a colourful character. He doesn't always come across like that, but he's had quite an interesting life. So if you get him in a bar one night over a beer, he'll tell you about the time that he punched Lemmy from Motorhead in Los Angeles, I think. But he's been a lawyer looking after showbiz types. He kind of burnt out from the law career. He then became a novelist, got a contract, had a couple of books published. So by the time I knew him, that was all in the past.
Okay.
And I read one of his books, The Art of Falling Apart, which I quite enjoyed. He sort of plays it all down now and says they were terrible, but I think I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then whilst I was there, I can remember the moment when one of our joint friends, joint colleagues at the BBFC in London, basically said to him, I'm starting to make money writing on ebooks on Kindle. And I don't think it had even occurred to Mark at that point that that was an option. Like lots of people, self-publishing was, I suppose, looked at as something that you paid to do if you couldn't get a contract, but it wasn't, it's something you put money into, not got money out of.
Right.
And that changed, that light bulb moment went on, and Mark is desperate to write. He's wanted to be a writer his whole life. And it's been wonderful to see for him and thousands of others that this opportunity has suddenly made it possible for him to write. So I was there when he started doing it. And I think it was The Black Mile was his kind of noir, Soho noir book. So we were working in Soho. I was there last night, actually. It's a fabulous part of the West End. It's seedy in places and dark and nooks and crannies and quite trendy as well these days. And he wrote this brilliant 1940s story about a serial killer operating amongst the rubble of the Blitz, which is a true story, actually. I don't think his was a true story, but it happened. You know, occasional wives got knocked off in the rubble of a bombed house.
Wow.
Yeah, well, you know, people took up the opportunity. So a pretty dark, sinister side of the Blitz, of the bombing of London. And I did a bit of work on the novel for him because I'd been a journalist, and it was a journalist as his main character. So I did some proofreading and also developmental reading with him and for accuracy. And at one point, he wanted me to narrate it. And so all this was sort of happening next to me, but I wasn't particularly involved more than just giving a helping hand here and there. And I was on his mailing list. So I think that was my first inkling of how this whole world operated, as I would get these emails from Mark, and I'd think, wow, he's enthusiastic. It's like the third email I've had this week telling him, you know, his new book's coming out. And of course, inevitably, I kind of bought it as a result of this email list, and didn't think too much of it until we then became involved together with SPF. And then I sort of thought back to those days and thought, that's why a mailing list works. Because I felt a loyalty to him, I was interested in his books, and he was alerting me to the fact that they were available. And I was one of the thousands of people who was went straight off to Amazon and bought the books.
Yeah.
But so he stayed at the BBFC when I left. So the BBFC, I should say, is like the MPAA. It's the film examining body. So we sat there watching films all day. It's a brilliant job. Sat there watching films all day, or wrestling, or whatever it was that came in on DVD, and gave it certificates. Yeah. But there was a downturn in DVD submission. They started making redundancies, and I started thinking I might want to do something else. So 2013, I took a redundancy, started a video production company along with a previous guy called John Dyer, who's also been at the BBFC, took redundancy the year before.
Oh, okay. So the partner that you had is also, I don't know if you say the word partner in your current business, but he's your partner now too.
Yes,
Still.
Exactly. So John and I started sort of working together. He'd started this video production company. I was still at the BBFC, but I had a lot of contacts from my RAF, my BBC days. There's a Freudian slip. From my BBC days, I was getting a load of work and I couldn't do it because I had a full-time job, and we would have these ridiculous. I remember there was this one weekend when I'd said yes to a job because it was at the weekend. It was in Warsaw in Poland. So I flew out to Warsaw. The next week they wanted me to go to Berlin and do a bit of filming for Volvo. And I hadn't run out of days leave. So I phoned up John and said, look, there's another job could you do? And he and his friend, John Stone, another John, who ran this video production company, they sort of subcontracted it to them. And I came back on the Monday morning. I had to go to work on Monday because I had no leave left, no annual leave. So I got up at sort of 6:30. It was minus 20 something in Warsaw, the ice everywhere. Got into the terrifying taxis in Warsaw, into the back of this cab, got to the airport, realized I'd left my passport, wallet, and everything in this hotel safe. I'm not the only person who's done this, but I only tell them I'd done it. Sent the taxi back with 60 euros or whatever to go to the hotel. The hotel were brilliant, actually, and they were waiting for him. They had everything out the safe, gave it to him. He came back. I just made my flight. I sat there on the flight. Now, if you draw a line from London to Berlin to Warsaw, it's a straight line. It runs exactly east-west. London, Berlin, Warsaw on a straight line from each other. So whilst I was in the air flying from Warsaw to London, I knew that John and John were in a plane passing me on the same route, landing at Berlin to do a job I really wanted to do, but I couldn't do. I landed in London, got the tube into the office, arrived at the cinema where my viewing was at 10:30 at about 10:20. So I had 10 minutes to go and get a coffee, which was great. And I sat there and I thought, I can't do this anymore. Something's got to give. I can't race around the world trying to do two jobs. And so I made quite a big decision to give up a full-time job and a decent salary and just hope that the video production work would sustain things. So that's what I did at that point. 2013, August the 1st was my first day as a free man since I was about 19 when I started my 9-to-5 career.
Right.
And we had, well, I guess about 2 years, and very quickly worked out that it would just about pay the bills, but it's hard work. We flogged around. It was brilliant. I enjoyed it. I went to Africa and Kenya and Uganda and filmed all around Europe, but it's not a scalable business. You know,
Right.
you write a book. It's a bit of digital that just sits somewhere in the internet, and you can
Yeah.
sell it 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times, having written it once. That, you know, that's why writing is the ultimate scalable business. And there
Yeah.
are other ones around. So John Dyer and I were looking for scalable businesses. We dipped our toes in a couple of other projects. And then in the middle of that, Mark Dawson from the BBFC, one of our old colleagues who I was in touch with, but didn't see very much, phoned me up and he said, a friend of mine, Nick Stevenson, has
Right.
done an online course. And
I'm in that course too.
there you
It's
go.
funny how many of you are kind of
It's
connected in a way.
all, it's a very small world, isn't it? And
Yeah.
he said, you know, Nick's done really well. It's sold really well. And he said, I know as much. In fact, I think I probably know more than Nick. You know, he's quite competitive, Mark, whether he does or not, I don't know. But he, you know, the competitive juices were flowing. And
Yeah.
I think he identified an area that Nick wasn't covering and thought, I can do this. He said, could you guys do the filming for me? Well, I said, right, fine. Let's have a coffee in London and talk about it. So by the time John Dyer and I turned up for the coffee at the BFI on the South Bank in London, we'd worked out that this was another attempt at ours to get into a scalable business. So we thought, well, rather than us do the filming for him in return for whatever, you know, a couple
Yeah.
of £1,000, we'd say, could we have half the business, 25% each, me and John, and you'd be 50%. And we sat down then. Before we'd said anything, Mark said, look, I've been thinking about this. Why don't we go 50-50 on this? So you three have 50%. And we looked at each other. Well, we can live with that. Yeah. And so we said to him, that's exactly what we were thinking. And,
Yeah.
oh, Kitty, we have not looked back. We have not looked
Yeah.
back.
The three of you, I mean, just listening to you guys on the weekly show, and then you know, whenever I can meet up with one of you someplace when we're all at the same writers conference or something, I just think this is a team that works, and
Yeah.
I think that in some ways it's not a difficult thing to find a team that works, and yet it seems impossible that you could be the one who won the lottery, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it really is a really complementary set of skills. I mean, Mark is obviously genius at marketing books. He's the devil's detail man. I mean, he knows where the nooks and crannies are, and he knows how to dot the I's and cross the T's, to use a writing metaphor. But he's also a great business strategist. Now, I'm not bad at business strategy, but I'm probably better at running a business and knowing what we need to do to run the business, and the platform needs to be there, which he doesn't want to do. Mark just does not want to do that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get lost in the account spreadsheet. I've been doing that today. I love it. He doesn't want to know. He likes to know, where our leads come from. Out of the people who bought the course last month, where did they all come from, and how much money did we spend on advertising? Obviously, so I can unpick all of that and give him the basis to make his strategy decisions.
Yeah.
And he'll say, we're going to pay somebody to do this because it's not worth our time doing it, and all these decisions. And John Dyer is somebody who's also a hands-on guy, and he's much more of a personable person, I think, than me. And he's good with the students and make sure that help desk runs smoothly. And yeah, it's a really good team. It's a really good team.
Okay, so this is around 2015, you say?
Yeah, about June 15, we launched the first course.
Okay. But the conversation that you sort of were in, but also just sort of listening to about the other employee who had gotten into Kindle book sales when Mark hadn't heard of it yet, that was 2010-ish, I think you said?
Yeah, I guess that was about 10, 11, around there.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit after coincidentally, I'd started writing my book in 2010, but I think maybe it was just after that Mark started really thinking about ebooks.
Okay. That was what I was going to ask, is what do you think was the thing that got you going again? Do you think it was listening to these guys talk, or do you think it was sort of an accident that all of these things were coming at the same time?
No, it was nothing to do with ebook sales or making money from books. It was everything to do with the personal challenge of writing a book. That's what it was. And it was, I can remember it really clearly. It was November the 1st, 2010, and Twitter was in its early days, for me at least. And one of my friend's husbands, James, another James, tweeted, he said, I'm going to do this to stave off mental torpor, was what he said in his witty little tweet. And I clicked on the link, and it was NaNoWriMo. And I read the gist of what it was, and I didn't read anything more. I never went back to the site again.
Yeah.
I just opened a Word document and started typing out this almost fully formed story from the word go that had just been obviously I'd just spent 10 years quietly thinking about this story.
Yeah.
And I started writing it and never stopped. I got NaNoWriMo done, probably had 60,000 words by the end of November, carried on, probably had 90,000 words by January, February. But it was a mess at that point. But I was doing it for me, and then became, of course, despondent because I didn't know what to do next.
Okay, this is exactly right. Exactly. So this is part of the reason why I wanted to sometimes stop you and make clear points to listeners, because there's a certain amount of, once somebody is in a place where you see them as being successful, and even though you haven't published your book yet, the fact is that you're part of this business, which is a great business, self-publishing formula, self-publishing for authors, and people probably see you as being that lucky guy. He probably gets all this extra free advice from Mark. But the fact is, every one of us has to sit by ourselves to write our books.
Yeah.
And so you wanted to, and you did it because you wanted to, not because you knew someone who might be able to help you.
No, absolutely wasn't. I guess at that point, in fact, I'm sure at that point, I was thinking about traditional publishing. I had no thoughts about self-publishing at that point. I just thought at some point I'm going to have a book, and then I do whatever you do to get it published. I didn't know what query letters were or anything in those days.
Yeah.
And I think I knew, I was grounded enough to know I had to write the book. So there was no point in me looking at other things. Yeah. But it was quite interesting because I was asked to revisit that more thoughtfully recently when I'd become stalled with the book. I hadn't made progress and I was very despondent about it. And as I mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, we had Jenny Nash, a very good editor in California, on, and she runs this program called Author Accelerator, which kind of book coaches. And I didn't really know what a book coach was, but I started to listen to this interview and I thought, this is exactly what I need. And so Jenny, I approached them and said, look, I want to use your services. I want to pay for hand-holding to get this just draft done. And she asked me at the beginning of that process to explain to her why I need to tell this story. Why do you need to tell this particular story? And so I had to go back and work out where that story came from and why it was there in my head. And it was very interesting that it went quite deeply into my background, who I am, who my parents are, the way I've been brought up, that thing you do when you get a little bit older, when you start to realize that you've perhaps been held back because some things happened in your life when you were young. It's taken you a long time to work those out. And we've all got those.
Yeah.
And as you get older, it's taken me a long time, knocking on 50 at this point, in my 40s, starting to work out or wanting to know who I was and what shaped me. And that led back to my father more than anyone else. So this book is a story I need to tell about what happened to my father and why he was the father he was to me, which is not sinister.
Yeah.
There's no abuse or anything going on here. This is a father like a million other fathers in America and in Britain who's not particularly demonstrative, doesn't really say I love you. There were no hugs, not really a lot of encouragement, just a kind of emotionally receded individual.
Yeah.
And again, I had this conversation. I used to think it was a very British thing, the British Reserve, but a lot of my American male friends say, buddy, that's my dad too.
Yeah.
He can't look me in the eye and say I love you. It's just not in his nature. But that's my feeling was, I think, when I explained to Jenny why I wanted to tell the stories, but that kind of stiff upper lip, that, brushing apart the emotional side of it, it can damage people. It doesn't give a man the ability to love or be loved and function emotionally properly in the way that a lot of women perhaps find easier, not as easy, but easier.
Yeah.
And so that suddenly I was amazed where I was writing this down for Jenny, a few tears coming out my eyes, thinking, wow, that was a really good question. Why do I need to tell this story? And once I'd answered that, the next stage, this is probably the third draft stage, but that draft now, which I'm working on now, came a lot easier because I knew why I was writing the book.
And this is another good place to stop and just let listeners really think about that question, that this is the question that changed how the book went for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It did. The story was more or less the same. The story is more or less the same. Something's changed, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in every scene, in every sentence is an echo of that. There's an echo of the stiff upper lip and the fact that this does not come without a cost in the future. And when you have that I mean, some people read this book. I've had one person read it, which is my father so far. So he's my ARC team. So I haven't told anyone this yet. I gave it to him about 3 weeks ago and he read it in a week. I'll tell you in a moment what he said. But he may well be one of the people who reads it and doesn't spot the theme, which of course would be a supreme irony. Lots of people will just read a book and they'll say, well, it was about airplanes. Other people will read this and it'll mean something a little bit different from what I meant. And other people will get it, I think, and understand why the story is telling itself. But for me, writing it, having that theme, having that purpose for the story has enabled me to write it properly.
Yeah. It's probably richer.
Yeah, I hope so. Definitely the characters are richer because you know what journey they need to go on. You know that they need to be fighting this, my main character needs to be fighting this urge just to toe the line and put his head down and get on with things rather than stand up and challenge what is the situation in front of him. Because he's my father, he's that generation who understand that you all toe the line and that's how the organization works.
Yeah.
Of course, occasionally you're presented with a situation in life where you've got to do the opposite of that. And that's a very difficult thing for an individual to do. So in my theory, in my world, this is almost like a fantasy. It's like this person who would have put his head down and become that emotionally closed person in the long run. But because this presented it to himself and because he made the right decision, he saved himself and he saved his children from being that closed up person. So that's part of the story.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we have already made a turn from me thinking, I really want to support James, but I don't want to add myself to his mailing list and then be one of the people that mess up his Autobots. And because I'm just not really interested in planes in World War II. But now you're like, if it's a story about a man who becomes a better man and has a better family because of it, I'm like, okay, I might have to read it then.
Yeah. Almost romantic, but it's romantic in a different way. It's not traditional romance. It's a romance about saving ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a bit, the Titanic script, I know lots of people thought it was very clunky and cliche, and it probably was and could have been written slightly differently. But the story behind the film, the Titanic film, James Cameron's film, I loved the story. And I loved the line at the end where she said, he saved me in every way that a woman could be saved. Yeah. Which is, and that was more of an open romance, but he was dead, right? So there was no romance beyond one night of passion in the back of a car.
Yeah.
The romantic side of it was what he gave her. So that I was really inspired by that. And this moment gives this person the rest of his life because he made the right choice. Or will he make the right choice, Kitty? Who knows? You have to read the book. He might make the wrong choice. Let's leave that jeopardy hanging there.
All right. So is now a good time to ask what your dad said, or I'll ask the question later?
So I handed it to my dad, and he had it a week or so. It's quite long at this point. It's 152,000 words at the moment, and it's not quite finished. So he didn't have the ending, and he didn't say anything to me. And I went over to see him, and he didn't say anything. And then he sort of said, "Oh, your book's not finished." So I looked at him and said, "Oh, you've read it." So he must have read it if he got to the point where it's not finished.
Yeah.
And I said, "What did you think?" And then before he could answer, I said, "What was your overall impression of the book?" Bearing in mind, I spent 8 years writing this book. Yeah. I didn't say that bit. I just said, "What was your overall impression?" And he said, there were quite a lot of RAF protocol errors in it. And I knew he was going to say that. He was going to say that. That's why I'm writing this book. Because, there was never going to be that's amazing that you've written this book. I can't believe you've done it. It's so good. Oh, I've got a few notes here and there, but, there was none of that. There's error because he's very practical.
Yeah.
He thought I wanted the practical. And he's given me, by the way, 2 or 3 pages, which I've got here somewhere, of brilliant notes. And I've already changed an aspect of the cover for technical detail. So he's perfect. And he'll be a great ARC reader for me. But I did say to him, when he said that, so I said, what was your overall impression? Well, there were quite a lot of RAF protocol errors. And I said, was that your overall impression of the book? And he said, oh, no, it was, it was okay. I wanted to know what happened next. And that's it.
That's a great compliment.
That's a great compliment. And I'll take that. And it meant a lot to me. He's 88 and he's deteriorated a lot this year. And I'm not unrealistic about it. Could be a phone call tomorrow when your parents are that age or my dad's that age. Yeah. And I just, the reason I handed it to, it was a rather spontaneous decision one day, a couple of weeks ago, but I just thought I'm going to regret if I don't get a chance, he doesn't get a chance to read it. So I'm just going to put it in his hand. I'm in the denouement now, so I'm hopefully, I can talk about the writing process in a moment, but hopefully getting there. But I wanted him to read it, and I'm pleased he's read it. And he's given me some, like I say, some brilliant notes, most of which will feature changes in the book. So,
and it's a story to tell later when the book's done and it's out. And I can't remember the name of the book. There's a book title. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. But anyway, it's that we all give in a different way. And so people who give in this way, if they don't get in that way, they think that people aren't giving to them. But for your dad, who's a very practical person, he probably was giving you like, I don't know, not a gift exactly, but like he thinks he's giving you something valuable by pointing out the errors so that you can correct them. So,
and he is, and when he said it's okay, I want to know what happens next. That was a huge compliment for him. So I'll take that.
And so I guess, just because we're writers and so we're always thinking in story, I'm thinking, there's probably somebody who's listening who's going, that's what I need to do with my one character. Like they're trying to give something in a way that somebody else is trying to receive it differently. And there's either, tension or conflict or learning to find, how we love differently or we give differently. And that, this is the way that this person shows me that they love me. Anyway, you got my brain thinking, so that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I'm thinking now as well. And I love one of the things. So working with the editor week in, week out has been brilliant for developing the way that I write and fine-tuning it. And one of the things she's got me doing, the bit she always loves, is when there's not a one-dimensional reaction to something, when it's conflicted. So I'm conflicted about hearing my father. On the one hand, would I have loved him to have said, I'm amazed you've written this book and well done. Yes, I would have loved that. But at the same time, that's not who he is. And he's given me something that I can be pleased with in terms of it. So things aren't straightforward. I can't sit there and say, something's wrong with my father. He can't talk emotionally about that. That'd be so wrong for me to think that, even though in the book probably is going to be a little bit more like that. Life is full of conflicted views, right? We don't have the answers.
That's right.
So we try and make sense of it, but...
Right. And the thing is that you as a parent, us as writers, the thing that we can give the world is the idea that maybe I should think about this from another perspective and find something in my life that I see is a better way to look at it, a healthier way, or get something more out of it because of a fictional story that I read where somebody had a similar situation.
Yeah. Well, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to make sure that all the things that you wanted to say to other people who are still doing, writing their first book or writing the 4th draft or the 10th year, or I'm talking to you, my friend Stephanie. Okay. What can you tell my friend Stephanie about how to get to the end for one thing and not keep second guessing yourself about, you know what, that's not the right beginning. I'm going to redo it. I'm going to start here.
I mean, I definitely needed help. I've really, really flourished under the tutorage of a book coach. So that's my number one thing. I think I've done things in the right way by accident, in that I sat down and just wrote. And NaNoWriMo was brilliant for that. And because you've got this clock ticking, and I was only fresh out. I was fresh out of the BBC, and I still had contacts there. And one of them had contacted me to appear on national radio to talk about NaNoWriMo.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like 4 days into this, and I'd tweeted that I was doing it. So I got the phone call from Catherine, who's a producer at Radio 4, and she said, look, come into London. We're going to have a lunchtime program, big high-profile program, and feature NaNoWriMo. Can you come in and do the interview? And I said, that's fine. She said, it's on Thursday. And this was, I think it was probably Wednesday. And I thought, that's fine. I'll come in tomorrow. She said, no, next Thursday. Now, that was interesting because that's quite a few days into NaNoWriMo. I was only 3 days in. A lot of people give up in that first week.
Yeah.
They don't make it into the second week. But I had to get to Thursday because I couldn't turn up as a fraud to Radio 4. So that was an interesting little moment for me. And I think once I got to Thursday, you've then got an investment that you can't really, if you let go, then it's going to be a real shame with 1,500 words a day at that point. So I just wrote, which obviously is good advice for anybody in the first draft. Just write. And also, if you're just starting out writing, you need to write to learn how to write. And I'm probably 300,000 or 400,000 words in now writing, and they talk about needing 1 million words to sort of find your voice. So that's all good. It made no sense really in terms of, although the basic story underneath it all had a beginning, middle, and end. But I'd invented the wife's family characters in London. I needed at the beginning to set them up properly, but I wasn't going back to the beginning. I just knew by the end of it, I then had to go back and sort everything out and put it in order. My idea was that would be the revision stage. But honestly, I didn't know where to start with that. And that I became despondent after I'd got to the end of it.
Yeah.
I became despondent. I just didn't, it was a mountain in front of me and I didn't know how to even put my first foot on the first foothill of that. So although I tinkered with it for a few years, nothing really changed. And then Mark came along and the whole SPF business started, and we did Facebook advertising for authors was the first course, which was really aimed at people with 3 books plus and who were advertising and paid ads and stuff. But his original idea was to do this foundation course to teach them everything he knew about how to set yourself up to be successful, how not simply just to upload your book or have a website, but how to do all of that correctly to maximize your chances of being commercially successful. Right. So we then visited that a year down the line and created what we now call a Self-Publishing 101 course. And he said to me, finish your book because I'll use it. So that gave me a target, which I missed. And I basically wrote the book again. So I thought, well, it was very long and rambling. It was 100,000 words and had too many characters, all the sort of mistakes you make. Yeah. So, and I'd read a couple of his books at that point, which were much simpler, fewer characters. And I thought, well, that's what I'll do. I'll strip it back down, take out everything extraneous and just tell this core story. Well, that was very short. It was like 50,000 or 50,000 words. Yeah. And also wasn't coherent because, well, what were the problems with it? There were several problems with it. One is it wasn't meaty enough. The story by itself, just telling the perfunctory mechanics of the story is not enough. That's not, and it got so far away from what I hadn't realized at that stage as to why I was writing it. It was just this perfunctory story. We did nonetheless use it. It pretended that it was finished for the 101. If you look at the 101 course, it gets a front cover, a brilliant front cover, and it gets uploaded all over the place, but actually it's not finished. And then I was in that limbo period tinkering with it. And, people listening will have gone through this, but I can't tell you another way out apart from the way out I found, which was to pay for a book coach. So this is not a developmental editor. Now, I tried this with my editor. So I had an editor, another Jenny actually. And I said to her, so she read it and gave me this feedback, which I kind of knew anyway. It's not substantial enough, but there's good characters because, said I can see the basis of it, but it's not there. But I didn't find it particularly helpful, apart from talking through some of the ideas, which did make it into the book in the end. But I wanted her to say, well, can you help me as I'm writing it? Perhaps look at a chapter as I write it. And she was very traditional industry and just said, write it again and then give it to me. I just don't think that's a good way of writing your first novel, because you do a lot of work in the dark by yourself. And then at the end of it, get told, oh, you should have done it completely different at the beginning. Obviously, what an inefficient way of doing any big project. Yeah. So when Jenny said, we do this Author Accelerator to get a manuscript done, and it's developmentally edited as you go along. So you'll get feedback saying, right, rewrite those scenes from last week and write 3 new scenes for next week. And that's how it kind of goes along. Now, I started doing that, and suddenly, a really important bit before then was her asking me why I'm writing it and me understanding that, and then redoing the outline. So we redid the outline, a 2-tier outline. If you're familiar with each sort of scene, you write what happens in it, and then another few lines on why, on what the motivation is of the characters. So each scene's got that. But Kitty, I've got that here. It's my Bible.
Oh, my goodness.
So these are the pages that I'm in the sort of end game here, but there's a good example of a scene here where boss tells Rob he's to be interviewed by the man investigating. And at the bottom here, 3 lines, the investigators are going to look through his logbooks. Rob will now know they're onto him and the clock is ticking. So that's the point of that scene. So you can write, it's a luxury this. Once you've done this, it's then, how much fun is it if someone says to you, right, 2 people need to go into a room and be interviewed, and one of them needs to come out of that in the certain knowledge that the clock is ticking and he's running out of time. And then you've got all the freedom in the world to talk about the smoke stained ceiling and the smell and his nervousness and him clenching his fists and trying. You can just enjoy the writing, knowing where you're going to get to.
Yeah.
So that was a brilliant system.
But you did this after you'd written the first draft.
After the first draft, after the second draft, this is when this is Jenny Nash. So this is Author Accelerator. This is part of their project. So at the beginning, they say to you, why are you writing the book? So they understand that. And then we do this outline, this 2-tier outline, and then you start writing it. Then you start turning these scenes into actual scenes in the book.
The reason I asked is because if you thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to start a new book. I don't know. I mean, there are people who can outline a book that they haven't written yet, but I would think that would be fewer people than those who could write a first draft, know that it needs work, and then go back and figure out what the story was that they were trying to tell and then outline it. Like one time I tried to write a brand new story that I hadn't actually written with a scene by scene breakdown like that. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got like 100 pages of notes and scene notes and stuff into it, I was just like, this is so boring to me now because there's no discovery for me.
Yeah.
So part of it might be just the type of writer, but do you think that part of it is because you'd already written the first draft?
I think that's a really good point. And I'm now thinking about the next book, obviously, because I'm in the Mark Dawson school of writing, and I know that I need 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books. Yeah. I started making some notes yesterday of an idea that's been going around my head, and it's an important thing to do because I need to set that up in this book as well, the character. And I think I'm going to do exactly what you've just talked about. I think it's the only way I know how to do it, which is just to sit there and write a draft and just write the story. It'll be gobbledygook and I'll make changes, but I'll discover the story in that process. Then I can outline it. I think that's how I'm going to do it. Everyone's different and it will work. And it does feel like a kind of, I was explaining this to a friend actually, that drink last night I had it in Soho. He wants to write a novel. Of course, everyone wants to write a novel. And I was explaining this to him and he said, so when you write it again, the second draft, do you use the first draft? You copy and paste? I said, well, I don't. I wouldn't. I'd rewrite it again because you'll write it better. So it's a waste. I said, well, it's not a waste. It's part of the process that's got you there. But I can see from the outside why that would look a daunting waste of time to write 75,000 words and then never read them again, or once you've done your outline and moved on. But I think that's what I'm going to do, Kitty. I think it's the only way I know. I think I'll discover the story properly, trying to write it down the first time. Then I can outline it like this, and then I can enjoy writing it.
Right. Yes. Because then in that second draft, you'll be like, oh, this is what I was trying to say the first time, and now I'm really saying it.
Yeah. And you can do the little clever things that you set things up properly at the beginning, and because you've got an idea what's going to happen to him. And so there's been lots of that in this. There's a character who sadly demises at various points in this. So it's been nice to have little tender moments with him and his wife early in the book when he's sort of contemplating life, with his whiskey tumbler, which he used to have 4 of these whiskey tumblers. Now they're down to 1. It's just what happens over the years. They have a few raucous parties in the officer's mess, and eventually he's just got this 1 tumbler, which he rather likes and hopes he's going to take it into retirement. Of course, my editor's saying it made me cry because I know what's happening down the line. But that's what you can do when you've got a decent outline and you've written the book already, so you're kind of familiar with the characters. And that I'm loath to say that's how you should write a book.
Thank you.
I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that I think it's going to work for me.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because I really, I believe, because of all the people that I've talked to and all the people that I've taught and stuff, everybody's got to find their own way. But to do that, it's so much more helpful if you can talk to 4 or 5 people who do it at least a little bit differently, so that you can find the way that works for you.
Yeah, definitely. Oh. There was not just whilst I'm on the subject, again, I'm a big fan of Author Accelerator. It's worked really well for me. The proof, I guess, will be in the pudding as whether the book's any good, but it's certainly been a brilliant process for me. And there was a great developmental moment at the beginning. So my book, without telling the whole story, my book starts with a crash. One of these aircraft behind me, actually, an Avro Vulcan, goes down. There's 3 people in the back, 2 crew. Only 1 person survives, which wasn't untypical of those crashes. The people in the back didn't have ejection seats. They had to kind of scramble out, and they often didn't get out.
Right.
And one of the guys who's died kind of gives up secrets from the grave, and the young guy who survived it realized he should have been paying attention when this guy was alive. He's onto something, and he's challenging the authorities, but he was being put down. So there's the conspiracy there.
Yeah.
And I wrote this original outline for Jenny and Lisette, who became my editor. And Jenny said to me, look, we're talking around in circles a bit about it. And she said to me, just put down on 2 pages, or 1 page of A4, maximum 2, explain to me what the secret is. What actually has this guy discovered? So I've got that clear. And I wrote down this page where I talked about this early flight where something went wrong. They almost crashed. And this quite wise, experienced air engineer started to have little flags going off in his mind. He's not seen anything like this before. He's noticed some senior officers who don't want to know the truth rather than do want to know what's happened. Mm-hmm. And he's also sensing danger going on. And so I wrote these 2 pages, and of course I had this next meeting with them, and they both said to me, it was the most gripping thing you've written. So they said to me, that's the beginning of your book. Your book isn't the day of the crash. Your book is 3 months earlier, when this starts to unfold. And in that one moment, it fixed a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Chiefly, it fixed the kind of lack of not enough happened in the story. Because it was only set over a week or 2 weeks. This guy discovered everything, and quickly the clock's ticking, had to solve it. Now there's this build up to it, this background where Rob's not, the young guy's not really aware of what's going on, even though they're meeting every day. And it's made the book, that one developmental tip from them that said, start your book 3 months earlier.
Wow. Don't
hide all this stuff.
Yeah.
Have the reader have this journey with him. So when he dies, the reader's thinking, oh no, has Rob got it in him to find this out? That's what you want. So it was brilliant developmental work, I thought.
Right.
Hope I haven't spoiled the
we're
book.
really kind of pitching Author Accelerator here. I'm definitely going to link to them in the show notes, but let's talk about anybody else that you thought was helpful from getting you from the first draft in 2010 when you did NaNoWriMo to now when we're looking at, so you and I are talking, it's early April, I have to look at my watch, it's early April of 2019, and we're talking about probably getting it done and putting it out this year?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was hoping it was going to be June. I'm slightly anxious that I haven't finished it, and it's, as I say, 152,000 words, which is quite long for a novel. So the revision stage, and Mark's already warned me that the revision stage will take longer than I think it's going to take. Even though this is developmentally edited, it's nowhere near copy edited, by the way. I don't necessarily misspell words, but I miss out words randomly when I'm writing quite fast. So copy editing to do. So I did want it to be June. I'm hoping it's going to be summer. I mean, I don't want to turn up at the conferences in the autumn and have that question every day, every 5 minutes, when's your book coming out, dude?
Yes.
So I want it to certainly be done at that point. So what's helped? 2 things I think have helped. One is I'm in an amazing community of authors like yourself, Kitty, and everyone's so supportive and friendly and enthusiastic for you. And every day of the week, I will get a note from somebody saying, keep going, just get it written. I know we can't wait for it. And that's hugely motivating for me.
Yeah.
And the next thing is a much more practical thing, and it's probably the oldest tip that you'll get from writers, which is to read. So reading books in genre for me has been hugely important. And I read a lot of non-fiction. I have my journalistic background. I don't know, I like reading. Not unrelated. So I'm reading Command and Control, which is about the development of the nuclear command system in America in the 50s. It's a fascinating non-fiction book, but I'm also reading Ken Follett books. I'm reading even David Baldacci. I'm reading a lot of books that are in roughly the same genre, and now reading them thinking, where are the beats? How's this story told? And that's as important as anything else. So reading. Yeah.
And have you found yourself, I mean, obviously, we stop and think about, oh, this is how it worked so well in this book. Like, am I doing it that well in mine? But has anything made you stop and think, okay, I actually am going to make a note that I'm going to make a change or?
I think one of the issues I've had is the really, really successful authors, James Patterson. I've read James Patterson. I've read Robert Ludlum. And Robert Ludlum, my dad reads Robert Ludlum, and I've seen his books around for years, but never read one. He's died now, I think, Robert, but I think his son now sort of does the books. And I read that, and it really felt like a Da Vinci Code style book, a Dan Brown style book, in that it's written in a slightly simplistic way, completely clear. There's no point, you're never bamboozled by what might be happening. You know, you're guessing what might be happening in terms of the story, but you're never unclear about what's happening because it's spelled out for you. And they are brilliant sellers and brilliantly written. And Dan Brown is a genius, and Robert Ludlum was a genius in the way they wrote these books. And these are high consumed books. The people who read Ludlum's read all of them, which is where I need to be, right? This is Mark Dawson territory. But I don't quite have that ability. Now, I'm not going to win a book prize the way I write, but I don't think I have that just writing as simplistically as that. For me, it's always got to be a little bit more flowery, I guess might be the word, a little bit more, what I'm going to say sophisticated, but I'm really trying not to use sort of pretentious language. It makes it sound like my writing's better than theirs, because it's not. It's easier for me to write in a slightly more noirish way, where I enjoy the writing, and if I was reading, I would enjoy the kind of descriptive writing. With those books that sell in my genre in big numbers are not like that. So I have discovered something through writing, but I'm not sure how it's going to help me unless I really sort of learn to write in a different way. But it's a bit of an interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it's a little bit like some people, you walk into their home and you think, oh, this is an antique collector, without even getting 2 rooms in. And some people, you walk in and you see, wow, this person must really be a minimalist, or else they just moved in. And I think that for lack of a better word, maybe it's a little bit like minimalism, in as much as, because it's still good. It tells you everything you need to know. You're emotionally invested. You're invested in the action as well, in the characters. It's not like anything's missing. It's just...
Yeah, it is quite perfunctory. It jumps. I mean, maybe that's what's going to happen in the revision stage. So Jenny Nash, I keep going back to this. It's been my life, and it is my life at the moment. It sounds like I'm a complete fanboy, but I am of Jenny. I think she's brilliant. And we do this book club episode on the self-publishing show, and Jenny's bits are the highlights in terms of, well, not to denigrate the others, that they're brilliant as well, but her description of what was wrong with the writing is really brilliant.
Yeah.
I think she's planning kind of a rather public revision phase with me, so that people can learn from it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if during that revision phase, she will ask me to strip out some of the extraneous, well, it does need to be stripped out, because I can't release a 200,000 word. It's not an epic fantasy. 200,000 word novel. So it will be maybe that in that process, I'll learn a little bit more about how you go from, action sequence, scene in the middle where they rest, but they're planning the next one, to next action sequence, which is kind of how Ludlum works. And it's a good page turning read.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say, you've definitely moved me from I'm not going to apologize for not reading his book, it's just not my type, to okay, I might have to read your book. But this kind of brings us around to something that you mentioned at the beginning. This is the power of talking about your book and having a newsletter where you're talking about your book, because you get people invested in something, and then they either want to support you, or they become genuinely interested in something that they may not have actually been that interested in at the beginning.
Well, it all comes down to storytelling, doesn't it, Kitty? Because the reason that you're thinking, oh, I'd like to read this, is because you want to know what happens. Because I've piqued your interest. There's a story there, and a lot's happened in the past, but where's it going? How's it going to end? Every aspect of our life is based around storytelling. Newspaper writers understand this. That's why they don't just write a story about 2 people getting married. They'll look for those little things that make you go, what? How's that happening? What's going to happen next? And when you want to sell your book, you need to tell people a story. It's what a newsletter is. It's about knowing who you are, the journey you're on. I hate the journey word, but there you go. The journey you're on. And then people, if you just say, here, my books are available here, that's going to be meaningless.
Yeah.
If you say to them, this is the book which changed my life, that's the sort of thing people are thinking, well, what's the story there? Where's the story? So you don't have to quite say that about every book, but a little bit of you going into your newsletter, a bit of honesty about stuff, or even uncertainty. I'm not sure whether I should have written this book, that type of thing. These are the emails that do well, keep people interested and make them go on. So we, the writers listening to this can be brilliant storytellers with their novels, but they need to understand that marketing is about storytelling as well.
Yeah.
And if you can grab people and bring them in, that's going to sell your books.
Well, that's an excellent segue to something that I did say. Why don't you talk about Mark Dawson's course and your business? It's your joint business with the three of you. Let's talk a little bit about that as we close up the show so that people know, if they didn't already know, what some of the resources are that you've been using successfully and that you're a part of offering to other people.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, like I alluded to earlier, we have two courses. I'm just going to get one just so I can keep myself informed, get the courses up here in front of me. One is Self-Publishing 101. Now, who's that aimed at? That is aimed at anybody who has got to the end of their manuscript. So basically, we don't teach craft. We do actually have a craft course coming up that can be completely separate. This does not teach you how to write all the stuff we've been talking about. This teaches you what to do with your manuscript once you've written the end and it's been edited and it's ready to go. So we talk about, cover design and not just cover, not just how you should do it, but why some covers work, some don't. Mm-hmm. Talk about the website, what it should do, its purpose, how you track things. We go through the whole process of communication with readers. Setting up the mailing list is a really important part of it. So Mark is a big advocate of the mailing list. I do occasionally meet authors for whom the mailing list is not that important for them, and that's great. They think things work in a different way for them. I think for most of us, a mailing list is going to be a foundation for our sales.
Yeah.
And if you use it properly, the way Mark teaches it, and he has it goes down to almost day by day, it literally is, he has a timetable for release and how it works. You utilize your mailing list to kickstart the old Amazon algorithm. If you get people doing a lot of things at the same time, the algorithm wakes up and it's like, Amazon likes stuff people like, right? It won't promote a book no one's buying, but it will promote a book that's got a lot of hits in 1 or 2 days. And that book will start to appear in people's emails that they get from Amazon and on their also boughts and all the rest of it. And suddenly you've got a bit of momentum going. But that takes planning. It doesn't happen by accident. You can't do it on Monday to get that ready for Wednesday. Yeah. So that's what the course is. It's pretty comprehensive. I think I counted up the hours recently. It's about 25 hours in it. But that includes a tech library, which, because a lot of people, it's really geared around anybody, so you don't have to have any technical knowledge, and you can literally go be handheld through the process of opening an Apple account, opening a Kobo account, etc., and then how to do the websites. So that's the 101 course. Now we do only open it a couple of times a year, which sounds a bit odd, but we have quite a lot of support that goes on with it. We have a team of people, and it just works for us. We get 600 or 700 people, wherever it is, sign up in one go, and they all go through it about the same time. You don't have to. The videos are there for your whole life and they get updated. It's yours for life once you bought it, including all the updates. But most people go through roughly the same time. So there's a Facebook support group and that works really well. So we've just closed it actually in, here we are in April, as you say. Yeah. It'll open again in the autumn. So probably in November, I'm thinking. No, it might be September, I think. So 101 will open. But if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/101, there's a wait list there and you can make sure that you know when it's going to open up again. And then the other course, which is the one we did first, is actually more advanced. It's called Advertising for Authors. And it's more geared around the paid ads platform. So these are people, you can pay for like Facebook advertising to build your mailing list with one book. And I'm building my mailing list now, even pre-publication, and I'll put some money into ads. But I don't expect that to be a profitable thing. It's a future building thing. But ads for authors is more about becoming profitable. So you probably need, I would say, 3 books, 2 at a push. More, the better, more product on the shelf to work with, the better. And then it takes you through 3 big ones for us, which are Facebook advertising, AMS advertising, Amazon Marketing Services, and BookBub ads. And then there's a whole bunch of other things about how you design ads and sort of Facebook Messenger bot, which is a kind of new thing that goes along with it. And that's a slightly bigger course. That's going to be open in June, we think. Okay. So that's the course where we have people like Shane Silvers, who's an author in where does he live? Not near Atlanta. I'll think of it in a second. Somewhere in the States. But he is one of a number of people who said to us, I'm a millionaire because of that course. I mean, not exaggerating. He said, I didn't know. I was bumbling along. I made a few $100s a month. he now makes 6 figures a month. And his readers adore him, and they have their own cons for him now. He goes to his own con.
Oh, I did read about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of your emails talked about him.
And he's not the only one. So this course, and this is to Mark's credit, not mine. I help him put it together, but it's his teaching. This unlocks it. If you've got the writing and you've got the books, this is the course that unlocks and turns it into a professional career for you. So we're really proud of that course, and I love going to meet people like Shane and interviewing him and hearing those stories. And I've got a page full of those testimonial interviews somewhere. So they're the 2 courses, and most of our life is geared around supporting them. So we're updating them at the moment. MailChimp are brilliantly I just re-recorded all the MailChimp stuff in 101 in November, and then they've just changed the platform 2 weeks ago.
Oh
so
gosh.
I'm now doing that, but that's, it's part and parcel of what people get. They get it up to date. So I'm redoing that, and we're going to put in some more advanced training into ads for authors. We'll probably have to re-record the whole of Amazon ads because that platform is changing quite quickly at the moment.
Yeah.
And most of our life is geared around doing that. But Kitty, it's been really successful. So touch wood, we're blessed. I'm blessed to have found Mark because he's the genius behind it. People love his teaching. It's made a practical difference to their lives, and people are therefore happy to invest in the course.
Yeah.
So it's providing a living for me and some space to write a book.
It's so awesome. That is the best thing. I mean, whether you're writing full time or doing something else that you love, so long as you can write, I think that there's a place where you can just be like, okay, I've got my joy. I'm good.
Yes, exactly. Well, waking up in the morning and starting work in your pajamas 5 minutes after you've woken up is also a blessing, rather than sitting on a train into London.
That's true. That's true.
But, yeah.
I was worried that I was going to be late to our interview just because the trains here in Malmö, Sweden were not exactly on time tonight. And I'm just like,
now that surprises me because the Swedes have a reputation for doing everything correctly and everything well. Not quite maybe to the Japanese bullet train level, but there you go. So Swedish trains can be late.
They can be, but I think that the problem is that when they are, for me at least, it's still such a surprise because all the rest of them, like I'm used to when I lived in Sydney, if the train said that it was at 12:18, then probably it was arriving at the station 12:18. You had probably until 12:19 to get on the train. In Sweden, I quickly learned the hard way. Like it took 4 or 5 or 6 times of me missing a train to realize this is the time the train's going to leave the station.
Yeah. And they've just introduced new trains in the UK. They do have that in the UK actually. And our trains are, in parts of the country, they're awful, but most of the country, they're much better than they used to be, certainly on our line. But they have the same thing, 12:18, it leaves 12:18. And in some cases, the doors shut 30 seconds before they leave and you can't get on. Which is a bit rude. It's a bit naughty, right? But yeah, so that's a new train.
Oh, man. Yeah, we found out the hard way that Paris train doors, they have no room for error in them. John's backpack got caught and kept the doors open, which is good because my leg was in the door and the rest of me wasn't. Thank goodness several Parisians jumped up and if they hadn't, I was just thinking, wow, this is my birthday celebration. I'm going to die on my 51st birthday.
In Paris. On a subway.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we've talked about Author Accelerator, and I don't mind saying Jenny Nash's name as many times as we need to. I'm a friend acquaintances with one of her partners' friends, Lisa Crone, who wrote Story Genius and Wired for Story. And I've had her on the show, and she told me you should have Jenny on the show. And then I heard her on your show. I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to, look like I'm copying and everything. But
you should definitely have her on your show. She's amazing, and your people listening will get a lot more out of it in terms of writing than they'll hear from me, who hasn't yet published a book. So Jenny, I can listen to Jenny all day talking about writing.
Maybe we should talk about having you both on talking about it together. No, I'm going to save that for you. You have your own show. You're going to want to do that.
Maybe after the revision process.
There you go. All right. So where can readers, sorry, I say that all the time. Sorry, everybody. Where can listeners find out more about you? Maybe sign up for your newsletter?
Well, we are all readers as well, right? I don't mind being called a reader. There's no such thing as a writer who doesn't read. Well, it shouldn't be. Quite simply, jamesblatch.com. So luckily, there's only a couple of prominent James Blatches in the world, and the other one is in Sydney. He's a bodybuilder.
Oh, wow.
So he's about, if you can see the YouTube, he's about that big. And he's recently been arrested for the supply of steroids. But we are in touch. We have been for years, because I occasionally get emails that are quite clearly for him, not me. Something about working on our abs on Thursday. And I say, this is the other James Blatch. So I send it to him and we laugh, and he sends some stuff to me. But yeah, and I think he's innocent. So I'm willing, James. He's got a new attorney team. He tells me he's hopefully going to go through the court system soon. But that aside, everything's a story, right?
That's right. Well, I was just going to say, I really I can understand how people could not really tell you apart, because you pointed to your pec muscles when you said working on your abs.
Oh, did I? I have no idea. See, no idea. I've got a gammy knee, is all I know. Yeah, so anyway, I have jamesblatch.com. He's never asked me for it, but I have it, and
that's good.
We hold on to it. So yeah, at the moment, it's just a single page, landing page, just to sign up to the my main list, and I've done a nice little responder sequence of 3 or 4 emails with a bit of backstory, a bit of stuff about my father and logbooks and stuff. So hopefully practicing what I've been preaching about, telling that story and getting people or sharing a bit of your life with people, so that that's the other thing about this, is either they're the right people who want to be there, or they're the wrong people. You shouldn't be afraid of some people saying, well, I didn't really like, you're sharing too much. That's fine. It's not for them. You don't change things for that, because the people who do stay are the right people.
That is another piece of great advice. Thank you.
Don't be afraid of people unsubscribing. It's a good thing. It means your list is shaping itself organically to be your list and not somebody else's.
Oh, perfect. And then one more time, let's do the address for everything that has to do with self-publishing formula.
So it is, again, that's hopefully fairly straightforward, selfpublishingformula.com. If you go there, and then it's a typical website with a set of tabs at the top, and one of them is called courses. So I would point people in the direction, depending on where you are with your career, there are a couple of free courses. And there's a really good, really useful one called List Building for Authors. It's on the courses tab at selfpublishingformula.com. Join that. It's delivered via email. It's 3 quite instructional video lessons on how to use Facebook ads to drive your mailing list building. And it's really good.
Excellent.
It's been, it's a lead generation thing, because people see the quality of the teaching and that it works. And then of course they're thinking, I must buy the real thing when it comes along. So it works very well, because it does what it says on the tin.
Excellent. Very good. Wow. Well, thank you so much. I think that this was really fun listening to your journey. And also, I love that you had so many tips for other people who might be on the same journey.
I hope so. I always feel at this stage, Kitty's still slightly fraudulent that I haven't published a book, but let's hope next time. Are you going to the conferences in the autumn?
I don't know what my plan is in 2019, simply because I have this opportunity to visit all of Europe, because everything is a 2-hour plane ride away. So yeah, we'll see. Okay. Well, if I bump into you, I'm hoping at that point I will be a published author, and I can look everyone else in the eye. Well, and I can just come over to the UK and say, James, I'm here to buy your book. Yeah. You get a signed copy for free. There you go. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kitty. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a really good chat. And you know what? When people interview you and ask you why you're doing it, what you're doing, it's a really good process to go through. So just my last tip might be that it's really good to buddy up with people and talk to each other about why they're writing the book and how they're getting on with that stuff. Because just thinking it through out loud is helpful, isn't it? I probably had a few ideas whilst I've been talking, which are going to help me with my process and so on. So yeah, so thank you for my therapy. So welcome. We'll do it again. Yeah.